Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. There was a note in my lunchbox, tucked right between the turkey sandwich and the crushed bag of kettle chips I'd forgotten to seal the night before. I almost didn't see it. Folded once, heart drawn on the outside in red ink. For a second, I felt something warm in my chest, like maybe this was one of those rare good mornings. Maybe she was softening. Then I opened it. I've got a date tonight, winky face. Don't wait up. Try not to be too jealous. There was no joke. No, just kidding. At the bottom. Just that little wink face she used to send me back when we were in love. Except now it felt like a slap in the face from someone who used to hold my heart with both hands. I was sitting in the dusty break room of Callahan's Auto Salvage, surrounded by grease-stained chairs and the sound of Barry from the welding crew snoring in the corner. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped the sandwich straight onto the floor. That note. That casual cruelty. Like it was a normal Tuesday. Like we were roommates instead of husband and wife. I didn't text her. Didn't call. Didn't rage. I just stared at the damn thing until my lunch break was over and clocked back in with that stupid smile I always wear when everything inside me is falling apart. By the time I got home, she was already dressed. I could hear her heels clicking against the hardwood floors from the driveway. She was humming. She hasn't hummed in weeks. Not for me. I opened the door, and there she was, standing in front of the hallway mirror, applying lip gloss like she wasn't about to nuke our marriage in a cocktail dress. "Hey, babe," she said without turning. "Hope you don't mind. I'm heading out with someone who actually listens when I talk." I didn't say anything, just watched her adjust the necklace I bought her last Christmas. The one she said was sweet, but not really her style. She finally glanced at me through the mirror and smirked. "Try not to be too jealous, okay?" I wish I could say I said something cool, something powerful, something she'd remember forever. But all I said was, "Then don't expect me to be here when you come back." Her smirk twitched, just barely. And for once, she didn't have a snarky reply. She left 5 minutes later, and I stood there like an idiot, wondering how long this had been going on, wondering what changed, wondering if I was always this invisible, or if she just stopped pretending. I spent the rest of the evening packing up a part of myself I didn't even realize had been dying. And on the nightstand, I left something she'd never expect. My wedding ring, wrapped inside the same note she left me in my lunchbox. The garage light was on when I got back from the store the next morning. I hadn't slept. My body had rested, but my mind refused. I wasn't even thinking about her anymore. I was just numb, like a man stuck watching his own life from outside a foggy window. The sun wasn't even fully up yet, and I just needed to move. I figured I'd take the car for a drive, clear my head, maybe even find a reason not to fall apart. But when I opened the garage door, I froze. There was a man's jacket hanging on the back of my workshop chair. A black leather one. Not mine. Not my size. Not even close. And there were 2 used coffee cups on my workbench, lipstick on one, fingerprints on the other. The same bench I built Brenda's bookshelf on last year. I walked over slowly, like I was tiptoeing around a crime scene, afraid that even breathing too hard would make it all too real. She brought him here, not just to our house, not just into our kitchen. She brought him into my space, the one corner of the world where I still felt like I mattered, where my tools had names and I could fix things, unlike my marriage. The worst part? She didn't even try to hide it, like I wasn't going to notice, like I didn't exist. That realization hit harder than any betrayal ever could. Because it wasn't just cheating. It was erasure. I was being phased out of my own life quietly and completely, like I was nothing more than a placeholder until she could upgrade. I picked up the jacket. It smelled like cologne. One of those overly confident scents that make you think the guy wearing it laughs too loud and winks too often. I dropped it on the floor and stared at it. I wasn't angry. I was humiliated. I texted her one word. "Garage." She replied 3 minutes later. "What about it?" That was it. No denial. No lie. No guilt. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I went into our bedroom, opened her closet, and pulled out the storage bins at the bottom. Inside were all the things I'd forgotten she'd hidden away. Photos of us in the early days, anniversary cards, and a small box of letters I'd written her while we were still dating. I didn't even know she kept them. I didn't read them. I just stared at the box, then closed it, took it back to the garage, and set it right on top of the jacket. My message wasn't dramatic. It wasn't explosive, but it was final. She came home an hour later, hair still tousled, heels in her hand. She paused when she saw the box on the floor. She didn't say a word. I looked her in the eyes and said calmly, "You brought someone else into my garage. You can keep the jacket." And the man. She blinked like she hadn't expected me to actually stand up. And for the first time in months, I didn't look away. That morning, I wasn't Benjamin the pushover anymore. I was the man who finally saw the truth for what it was. And I was just getting started. Later that afternoon, I was sitting in the driveway in my car with the windows rolled down, just listening to the wind. I wasn't ready to go anywhere, but I couldn't stay inside with her either. The silence between us had become unbearable, loud in a way that felt personal. I didn't trust myself to speak, not because I'd explode, but because I might beg. And I'm done being the kind of man who begs for basic respect. I watched her through the living room window. She moved around like nothing had happened. Music played softly inside. Some upbeat pop garbage that sounded like it belonged in a teenager's breakup montage. She danced barefoot across the kitchen, pouring a glass of wine at 3 in the afternoon, still wearing the same oversized t-shirt she wore on our honeymoon. A memory that used to bring warmth now made me feel sick. That's when it happened. Her phone lit up on the passenger seat. She must have dropped it in my car the night before. The name on the screen wasn't saved, just a number. But the preview of the message made my blood run cold. "Same time tonight? You left your scarf winking face." I didn't want to look. I really didn't. But I did. I swiped it open. I know I shouldn't have. But at that point, I felt like a man walking through his own burning house. Privacy didn't matter anymore. The house was already on fire. Their conversation was casual, flirty, familiar, like this wasn't their first week or even their first month. Photos, inside jokes, a video I didn't open because I was afraid of what I'd see, and a message from her, from just 2 days ago. "He still has no clue. He's sweet, but so empty. I can't even hate him. He's like a tired ghost." That's what I was to her? A ghost? That broke something in me. Not in the screaming, dramatic way. More like a quiet breaking. Like a support beam finally snapping after carrying weight it was never built to hold. I put the phone back where I found it and walked into the house. She was lounging on the couch, phone missing from her hand, legs up, smiling like a woman with nothing to lose. I stood in the doorway and asked one question. "How long have you been calling me a ghost?" Her head whipped toward me, eyes sharp, and for a second, just a second, she looked guilty. But then she adjusted her expression into that same tired smirk, the one she wears when she's done pretending. "You weren't supposed to see that." She didn't deny it. She didn't panic. She just said it like she'd dropped a glass of water. I walked past her, grabbed my jacket, and headed toward the door. "Where are you going?" she asked, no urgency in her voice. "To remind myself I'm not invisible," I replied. "And maybe to see what it feels like to breathe without you in the room." She didn't follow me. She didn't stop me. She didn't care. Or maybe she did. But just enough to notice the silence after I was gone. Not enough to fix it. Not enough to fight. That night, I stayed in my brother's spare room on a lumpy mattress next to a stack of unopened Amazon boxes. And for the first time in a long time, I slept without dreaming about saving someone who didn't want to be saved. I didn't feel better, but I felt real, and that was more than I'd felt in years. The next morning, I came back to the house not because I missed her, but because I had nowhere else to go. My brother's couch was uncomfortable, and I knew he was too polite to say he wanted his space back. Besides, I still paid the mortgage. That house wasn't just hers. It was mine too, even if it hadn't felt like it in a long time. I didn't expect anything dramatic when I walked in. I thought maybe we'd avoid each other. Maybe she'd pretend none of this happened. Maybe I'd find a quiet way to sort my things. What I didn't expect was to hear her voice echoing through the kitchen on speakerphone. Laughing, casual, as if nothing in the world was broken. I paused in the hallway, just out of sight. I didn't plan to eavesdrop. But then I heard my name. She was on the phone with someone. I assumed it was him. That man. The one who apparently knew the layout of my garage better than most of my friends did. "You should have seen his face," she said, chuckling between sips of something. "He looked like a kicked puppy. Honestly, I felt a little bad. But he's just so slow, so used to being ignored, I don't think he even knows what normal attention looks like anymore." I wanted to turn the corner and confront her right then. But I didn't. I stood there, frozen. Maybe some part of me needed to hear the truth as it was, unfiltered and cruel, instead of the half-hearted excuses she would have handed me if I asked directly. The guy on the phone laughed. "You think he suspects anything?" There was a pause. Then she replied, "It doesn't matter if he does. He won't do anything. That's the thing about Ben, he always stays." That's when I left. Not just emotionally this time, but physically. I walked out without saying a word. I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a scene. I just grabbed the folder of important documents I'd stashed behind the laundry room panel years ago. Birth certificate, passport, the backup copy of our prenup, and walked out the front door. That night, I sat in my car in the Target parking lot for 3 hours. I didn't know where to go. I just sat there and watched people walk in and out, pushing carts, holding hands, arguing about snacks. The world kept moving even as mine stalled. At some point, I checked into a cheap motel near the highway, the kind with buzzing lights and ice machines that don't work. I stared at the popcorn ceiling and asked myself questions I couldn't answer. How did we get here? Why didn't I see it sooner? When did I stop being enough? I texted her that night, just one sentence. "You were wrong. I won't stay." She didn't reply. Not then. Not for hours. Not until 2:13 a.m., when I got a message that read, "You're being ridiculous. Come home. We can talk." I stared at that screen until it dimmed. Then I turned off my phone. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for her to fix it. I wasn't hoping she'd change. I wasn't clinging to some fantasy version of the woman I married. I was just done. And somewhere in the middle of that empty motel room, I finally realized. She didn't break me. She revealed me. She exposed how much of myself I had given up just to keep something that wasn't even real anymore. This wasn't the end. It was the start of something new. But I had no idea yet just how far the unraveling would go. 2 days after I left, I went back to the house. Not to see her, not to speak, but to grab a few boxes I had left behind in the crawl space. Old college notebooks, a few vinyls, my late father's camera. Things that didn't matter to her, but mattered deeply to me. I made sure she wouldn't be home. Her car was gone. Her schedule hadn't changed much. Tuesdays were always yoga and drinks nights. Funny how I never questioned that before. The house felt hollow when I stepped inside. Not quiet, hollow. Like the walls had exhaled something heavy the second I left. And now they didn't know what to do with themselves. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was accusatory. It echoed. I didn't linger. I went straight to the crawl space under the stairs, popped the panel off, and reached for the plastic bin I had wedged back there years ago. And that's when I saw it. Not the bin, that was where I left it, but something lying flat beneath it. A torn envelope. My name written in her handwriting, but never delivered. I hesitated. For a moment, I thought maybe it was old. Maybe it was something from the early years that slipped away. But the date in the corner was fresh. Just 6 weeks ago. I shouldn't have read it. But of course I did. "Ben, I don't know how to say this to your face, so I'm writing it down. You deserve someone who sees you, not someone who's just tired. That's what I've become. Tired of pretending. Tired of this version of life. I've wanted something else for a while, and I've been too much of a coward to admit it. You're good. Too good. That's the problem. I don't feel like I belong with you anymore. You don't challenge me. You don't fight. You just absorb things. I need more than that. I'm sorry I didn't say this sooner." No signature. Just the cold weight of those words pressing against my chest like concrete. I sat on the floor for a long time, holding that letter like it was a ticking clock, counting down the end of everything. This wasn't about betrayal anymore, it was about dismissal. I wasn't cheated on. I was replaced emotionally long before she ever crossed the line physically. And she never had the guts to tell me. She let me play the role of loyal husband. Let me sleep beside a stranger who had already walked out of the marriage in her heart. That was the moment I realized I had wasted years trying to be what she needed when she never even tried to be what I deserved. All those times I stayed up fixing the leaking sink, ironing her blouse, making her tea when she had headaches. I thought I was nurturing love, but I was just delaying the moment she'd finally hand me this truth. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. My hands trembled. My jaw clenched, but no tears came. I guess when pain gets deep enough, it forgets how to leak out. I burned the letter. Right there, in the backyard fire pit we bought together on our 3rd anniversary. The one she never used because she hated the smell of smoke. I watched the flames eat her words slowly, curling the edges, turning apologies into ash. As I left something on the kitchen counter in return. A note of my own. Nothing poetic. Just one line. You could have said it to my face. But now I don't need to hear anything ever again. I locked the door behind me, dropped the key into the mailbox, and walked away without looking back. But the universe wasn't finished with me yet. What I discovered next would flip the entire story on its head, and prove just how far she'd really gone. I hadn't planned to log into anything of hers. I didn't want revenge, I didn't want drama. I just wanted to get out with some piece of myself still intact. But 2 days after leaving the house for what I thought was the last time, I got an alert from a streaming service we both used. It said our subscription had been canceled, which was odd, since I was the one paying for it. I logged in to check, more out of habit than concern, and that's when I realized something strange. Her email was still logged in on my old tablet. I hovered over the icon. I told myself to leave it alone. I had made the decision to walk away. What good could come from digging around? But something about the way she'd handled everything, the way she'd erased me while pretending it was just a phase, something didn't sit right. So I tapped in. Her inbox opened like a window into a life I never got to see. It was worse than I imagined. She had an entirely separate existence, an alternate version of herself she never let me see. There were messages from a different email address, one I'd never known she had. The subject lines were subtle. Details for the weekend? Reservation confirmed? Same hotel. My stomach twisted as I opened the threads. She'd been coordinating weekends with him under a fake name. He booked the rooms, she paid for dinner, and they traded compliments like it was a game. But it wasn't the cheating that broke me this time. It was the tone. She laughed in those emails. Real laughter. She teased him, made plans, told him about her dreams, the kind of conversations she hadn't had with me in years. She told him she wanted to move away when the timing was right. She told him she hated how small her life felt and how she'd outgrown her marriage like it was an old pair of shoes she kept around out of guilt. Then I saw the folder labeled Us. It wasn't about me and her. It was her and him. Dozens of photos, selfies in cars I didn't recognize, meals at restaurants I'd never been invited to, beach shots with her arms wrapped around him like she used to do to me when we first started dating. And then, the worst one. It was a screenshot of a meme she'd sent him. It said, "When you fake laugh at your husband's jokes because you need him to pay the mortgage." Underneath it, she had typed, "LOL, too real. I can't explain the kind of pain that comes from being turned into a joke. Not a fight, not a betrayal, a joke. I wasn't even worth hating. I was something she tolerated, like a chipped dish she was too lazy to throw out." I deleted nothing. I didn't reply, didn't snoop further. I closed the tablet, set it on the nightstand at my motel, and sat in the dark for hours. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because for the first time I understood exactly what I would do. She thought I was predictable, quiet, harmless. She thought I'd fade quietly into the background, like wallpaper peeling off the walls of her life. But she forgot one thing. Ghosts don't disappear. They haunt. And I was just getting started. I didn't sleep the night I found that inbox. The weight of it pressed on my chest like a cinder block. She had been planning a new life while I was still memorizing her coffee order. But I wasn't going to write some long, dramatic goodbye. I wasn't going to burn her clothes or key her car. I wanted her to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: consequences. And I wanted to deliver them in a way that pierced deeper than yelling ever could. So I waited. I knew from her emails that she had a weekend trip planned with him, reservations under her fake name at a boutique hotel about 2 hours away. I drove there Saturday afternoon, parked in the lot across the street, and sat in my car with a coffee I couldn't drink and hands I couldn't keep still. This wasn't about winning. This wasn't even about anger anymore. It was about truth, raw, unfiltered truth. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the narrative of our marriage without showing her the ending I chose. At 7:12 p.m., they walked out of the hotel. She was wearing the same leather jacket I bought her 2 Christmases ago. The one she claimed was too flashy to wear anywhere. He looked like a walking cliché: designer beard, fake confidence, and the posture of a man who had never been told no. They didn't notice me. They laughed as they walked toward a nearby restaurant, and that's when I made my move. I followed them in. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell her name across the dining room. I simply asked the host for a table near the window and watched her laugh from 3 tables away, completely unaware of the storm brewing 10 feet behind her. I waited until they ordered. Waited until she leaned across the table and touched his wrist, smiling like she'd never known heartbreak. And then I stood. I didn't walk to their table. I walked to the bar and handed the bartender a small envelope. Inside it was a printed photo, one of the many she had sent to her lover. The one with her sitting on my workbench in my garage. I had scribbled on the back, "She calls this her safe space. It used to be mine." I watched as the bartender carried the envelope to their table, placing it in front of her with a neutral nod. Her smile faded instantly. Her hand trembled slightly as she opened it, eyes darting from the image to the writing on the back. She didn't look up. He did. He scanned the room with a confused expression. She was frozen, lips parted, completely still, like a glitch in a simulation. Then she slowly turned, and our eyes met for the first time in weeks. I didn't smirk. I didn't wave. I just held her gaze for 3 full seconds, then walked out the door and disappeared into the crowd. She didn't follow me. He didn't say anything. I was gone before they even stood up. That night, I drove back to the motel and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not revenge. Not justice. Closure. She had rewritten our story behind my back, but I got to write the final sentence. And now, the silence she left me with? It was hers to carry. But this chapter wasn't quite over. The fallout was just beginning. 3 days passed after I left the envelope. I didn't hear from her. No texts, no calls, no apologies. And strangely, I didn't need any. I had already grieved the version of her I married. The woman I thought I knew didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never really did. What I was left with wasn't bitterness. It wasn't even sadness. It was space. And in that space, something started to grow. I spent the next week rebuilding, not a relationship, not a home, but myself. I moved into a small rental on the edge of town, close to the woods, where I could finally breathe without wondering if I was being watched, judged, or ignored. I hung my father's old camera on the wall, unpacked my books, started cooking again. The first meal I made was for myself, not to impress or please anyone, just because I was hungry and deserved to be full. Then one afternoon, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. It was from her. "I didn't expect you to ever fight back," she wrote. "That envelope, it shook me. You were always quiet. I thought I could walk over that. I was wrong. You didn't yell, you didn't beg. You let me look myself in the mirror. I never saw myself so clearly before. You deserved more than I gave. I'm sorry." There was no "please come back," no promises, just an apology. And you know what? That was enough. Not for reconciliation, but for peace. Because I realized something. I never needed her to change. I needed me to change. I spent years waiting for someone else to see my worth, when the truth was, I had to stop giving it away to people who didn't know what to do with it. A few weeks later, I met someone. Not in a rush. Not a whirlwind. Just a real conversation at a bookstore over a dog-eared copy of Catcher in the Rye. Her name's Lila. She listens. She asks questions. She laughs without cruelty. I don't know where it's going, and I'm okay with that. I'm no longer trying to script my life to avoid pain. I'm just living it, messy, flawed, honest. So if you're watching this and you feel invisible, unheard, or like you're fading into someone else's shadow, let this be your sign. You don't have to scream to be strong. Sometimes walking away quietly is the loudest thing you can do. Thanks for watching this full story on Reddit Confessions. Now it's your turn. Have you ever had a moment where someone finally saw that you were done? Or maybe you left in silence and it spoke louder than any words could. Drop your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Reddit Confessions for more powerful true stories like this one.